And today we are speaking with Miles Johnston from Basis project. And you have got a conference now that we can see on the internet. So we would like to ask you about the conference, and we would like to ask you about James Casbold and the development of the investigation of the death of super soldier Max Spiers. Yeah. And the questions, I'm not here alone, we are three of us. It's a team from Poland here. They drove here 15 hours to Czech Republic and Ripsonar's news, and they are my guests. So the questions, first questions are from them, in case that we couldn't, you have time only 1 hour. So maybe we could do another interview with my questions, but we just...
well, we'll start.
Yeah,
I've just finished an outside broadcast for a European sports channel, and we're here in Greenwich in East London. Well, we're here at Greenwich. You can't get east or west at Greenwich. We're exactly east and exactly west. So there we are, right here, Greenwich in London.
Did you say sport channel?
Yes, I do sports outside broadcasts, and we were up till about 3 o'clock this morning, packing all that away at the Millennium Dome here in London.
Oh, it's something new for me because I know you with other topics.
Yeah, well, I do. I try to earn a buck using doing outside broadcast television. That's my profession.
And if you would say what you are mostly well known for, it's super soldiers and
the Basis project. The Basis project is all about transhumanization, and this is a very old topic. We now know they've tried to do this twice in the past, once in Egypt and at other times in our ancient past. And the phrase pre-flood man is something we have to understand. Pre-flood man technology is the technology of our ancestors before there was a massive flood here on Earth. And one of the most recent people I interviewed from Vancouver, she has very clear memories of being a young child on Mars. And remember, people must understand that Mars has got a blue atmosphere, not a red one. The first pictures that came back from the Viking probe in the 1970s showed it has a blue atmosphere. That means nitrogen. That means it has currently got active life, vegetarian life on Mars. She remembers as a young child in a past life being scooped up by the parents and the adults and quickly pushed into spacecraft and immediately evacuated from Mars while Mars itself was under assault from fire from above. And they were taken to Earth, where Earth was suffering at the same time, but Earth was having a torrent of water, which seems to have led to the flood at that time. So it's clear that a lot of humans literally had to be evacuated from Mars in the pre-flood high technology era of human existence in the solar system. And the survivors of that grew up to be modern day humans, and she has a memory of that. This is crucial to Ireland and the British Isles, which until several thousand years ago, they were one landmass. I mean, the River Thames that goes through London here was merely a tributary to I think the Rhine. So the North Sea was grasslands at that time. So the crucial thing is that we have memory in our genes, and the peoples of this part of Europe re-civilized Europe after that great catastrophe, after that great flood. And so there was a very high technology civilization that existed not too long ago that suffered virtually catastrophic destruction. We have known it as Atlantis, and the Atlantis continent, or the landmass which was Atlantis, we now have indications, this was discussed at my conference, that the landmass of Atlantis is somehow out of our dimension and will sometimes reappear. And this is known in Ireland as High Brazil or High Brazil. It's a physical landmass that appears off the coast of Ireland that you can go to, you can see, it's physically here, but then it disappears. On the other side of the Atlantic, it's known as a Bermuda Triangle. And we understand there are other areas in the Atlantic off the coast of Scotland, which will also, islands will appear physically, you can see them as a landmass, and then drift back out of reality. So some kind of major dimensional issue happened when whatever caused that catastrophe all those years ago happened. And that information is locked up in what we now call the Irish, or the people who survived that great catastrophe. But because we have a predator, there's a predator amongst human beings which is here and causing havoc, mayhem, destruction, and killing. They do not want those who could remember the solution to what happened in those days to wake up. And that is why the Irish conference, the BASIS conference in Ireland, which happened only a few weeks ago, was called Ireland Awakens, because the Irish started to wake up in the 1960s, which is why there's been so much trouble in Northern Ireland. All of the terrible events in Northern Ireland, the terrible troubles, we now have very strong indications were deliberately incited by a foreign intelligence service to keep us in Ireland fighting against each other. The basic principle is if we fight each other, we won't wake up and then work out what's going on. What happened in the 1970s when I was involved with a lot of broadcasting and lots of other people across Ireland were all waking up. There was a major explosion of broadcast radio and actually television, which led to the explosion of multi-channel television across Europe. That all originated in a waking up process in Ireland in the 1960s and 70s. And I was very, very lucky and happy to be part of that. And that's what was partly explained at the BASIS conference.
Miles, you have a YouTube channel, Miles Johnston, and this BASIS project conference interviews, or I mean lectures, are you going to have them on your YouTube channel?
Yes, we had them available live as a test because we had many issues with our technical equipment that were being targeted. We had computers with the central processor roasting hot, just doing nothing except burning hot. And our radio mics and things were being targeted. So there was an awful lot of effort to try and stop us. But we overcame all those efforts, including, I don't want to go into them, but we overcame all those efforts. And everybody there had a really wonderful time. It's very exciting. And one of the important things was a very high balance of the female energies, the feminine, and the male energies. So this is very important in terms of the development of consciousness in Ireland.
Mm-hmm. And the first...
Those, I will be re-editing those, sorry. I will be editing those in due course. But giving all the lectures away for free costs us a great deal, and it costs a lot to put these things on, and giving them away for free in good faith lets people know, but we do need some kind of contribution towards our efforts for going.
Absolutely, I've been working for so many years with this. And I would just ask, the first interview you mentioned when we started to talk, do you have it on your YouTube channel, and what's the name?
Yes, they're all available. They were all available until yesterday. I could only have them up for a week. We had about 25,000 hits on those interviews. Yeah. But they are very raw interviews. They're literally as it happened. And what I'm doing is I'll be editing those and putting up captions and making any repairs or things which need to be inserted or removed in the edit. And they'll all be available in a few weeks' time.
So the woman you mentioned in the beginning that you have interviewed about with these memories, was she part of the conference, or was? Well,
she's actually from Vancouver, and we are hoping at some period of time that to have a BASIS type conference in Vancouver, and this is what I'm encouraging. the main thing about the Irish conference was this was the first time I had a different group of people who volunteered to come together to put on a conference. They have their local contacts and local infrastructure of people that they want to get out there. This is an amazing collection of very illuminated and very well-informed and advanced thinking people, and we were able to put that together over 3 days. We also had Ireland is one of the countries which suffers horrendous satanic type abuse of children. This is a terrible, terrible thing which is going on, and that is because we have a predator which lives in human bodies. If you were going to be any kind of an alien, for want of a better word, in three-dimensional matter on Earth, the only stable way that you can actually operate is through a human body. So literally the aliens look like us.
Yeah. So
that is the only practical way of operating, and that was something which was very important as far as the death of Max Spiers. And I have to be very careful because the Max Spiers issue is obviously open to investigation by various authorities. As with any death, if there's any kind of impropriety or we don't know, it needs properly investigated. So we cannot say what happened. There are lots of rumors and things what happened. Obviously, there is a mother who has lost her son, and she needs answers to this. And we have to wait for the proper authorities to make their investigations. All we can say is, did something suspicious happen? Yes or no? We don't know. Obviously, we have a grieving mother, and there are questions which have to be answered. And because of the nature of Max's, the things that he did, this involves some pretty heavy-duty concepts and some very serious matters. So obviously that is something else, but in terms of the actual reasons as to what happened there, only those there know what happened. Only Max himself knows what's happened. And anything else is conjecture, and we have to leave that, as I say, to the necessary authorities to make their investigations. And it doesn't help. Essentially, my role was, I think something suspicious has happened here. I think questions need to be asked, and that's my role is over on that. It's the proper authorities under these things which have to take over, and that's what's happening. And they take a long time to do their investigations.
Yeah, I know several of the people that were the speakers at the conference you had now.
Yes.
Could you just mention like all of them and a little bit?
Well, one of the most important speakers is an astronomer, an Irish astronomer called Eamon Ansborough. He is an extremely brave scientist who is talking about the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And there is an official body in astronomy which is monitoring that. Very simply, we're told wrongly that the speed of light is a limit and you cannot surpass the speed of light. We're also told wrongly that the only way to communicate is using radio waves or electromagnetic waves, and electromagnetic waves are limited or have this constant traveling through a vacuum of space of the speed of light. So this means that if you have a star 50 light years away, if I say hi, we have to wait 50 years before they receive it. And then they say hi back, and we have to wait another 50 years to receive. So saying hi to each other taking 100 years is logically completely impossible and ludicrous. What Eamon discussed at the conference was a form of scalar or longitudinal wave transmission, which Nikola Tesla was dealing with. And this is instant. This is not a Hertzian wave. It is not limited to the speed of light. And so he has announced that he was developing a machine or a couple of machines which would be able to transmit and receive messages from extraterrestrial intelligences instantaneously, just like we are talking now. Now that means a concept of physics which has been heavily suppressed, because the physics which involves that will also lead you to zero-point energy, anti-gravity technology, interdimensional travel, and this is not in the interests of many, many businesses and industrialists, because it means they don't make money out of it. So it's called non-Einsteinian physics, and this is something which the Germans were working at with the Nazi bell, the so-called bell, in the 1940s and 1930s. So this is a type of physics which has been heavily suppressed for over 70 to 80 years, if not more. And more scientists in the modern era are beginning to use this kind of physics, which enables you to have instantaneous dimensional travel between the worlds. But it's also a type of physics which was uncovered in the 1950s by various secret military excursions to find this ancient knowledge, to find the knowledge of ancient, not that long ago, pre-flood man technology. And our ancestors, who put the standing stones up all across the world, had the knowledge of interdimensional travel. And so this is really important. That was Eamon Ansborough. He also investigated major UFO activity in the southwest of Ireland. And so we know that there is a huge undersea base, much bigger than Area 51, if anybody's heard of Area 51. This is out in the Atlantic Ocean. It's off the southwest corner of the continental shelf of Ireland in the deep Atlantic. And so this is yet another type of connection with some kind of lost continent or civilization which is not quite in this dimension. And so we're dealing with very advanced concepts, but clearly we're dealing with highly advanced technology from our past, maybe 10,000 or more years ago, which is now the main source of where everybody wants to try and get this information of this technology. And somebody we interviewed earlier, Valery Uvarov in Russia, in St. Petersburg, he discusses that some kind of ancient defense system, which is mostly in our dimension, but is also in another dimension. So whatever happened 10,000 or so years ago would indicate that we were attacked by some kind of controlled weapon system, some catastrophe happened. The Earth had a defense system. We have a predator. That predator did get through. It is causing us tremendous damage and harm with humanity across the world. With our DNA, we should have a 3-stranded DNA, not a 2-stranded DNA. Our abilities are severely limited by this predator. And again, the Ireland Awakens title is an indication that modern people in Ireland are waking up to a reality we knew about in the past, which a predator, and we identify the Battle of the Boyne and other practices like that. The Battle of the Boyne, which has been a major division in Ireland with the Orange, King William of Orange and things like that. That was designed to cause conflict, a bipolar conflict, anger between Irish people, so they would always argue and fight. So what we're talking about is that is a rouge, it's a con by a deception. It's a deception by a predator, and it is not in that predator's interests for Irish people to wake up. And I'm talking about Irish people all over the world. And remember, Ireland has got many, many ancient connections with civilizations all across the world because of our ancient, wonderful civilization we used to have here. So what BASIS is all about is highlighting that we have a predator. They are making cyborg robots. The latest information from some of the individuals I know that they were dealing with these human-looking robots. They don't last long. They are like clones, but they're like clone soldiers. But that's 60 to 70 years ago. The problem about the human body is that we repair ourselves with our cells. Our cells rebuild all the time, but they rebuild on a copy of an energetic body which is in a different energy field. But the clones do not have a good copy to rebuild their bodies. So the clones will wear out within about 3 to 9 cell regenerations before they decay and don't work anymore. Because we have a soul, what people would call a soul, an energy field, we are primary life forms. We live 100 years. I mean, if we ate properly and exercised, we would live about 120 years. But most people live 75 years or whatever. But the clones that we make and have been making don't last much longer than about 3 generations, which is about 9 months, possibly a year. So we now know that we're also creating these so-called aliens, these greys, and that's what the first interviews at Basis was all about, that they were making programmed generated life forms in laboratories in England. We know that they were making a type of alien grey to work on the lunar base. So that means that we have lunar bases, and they certainly don't get there in a tin can like an Apollo capsule. You have to use some kind of energetic field device to retain your soul, your energy field soul, in synchronization with your physical 3D body. If you lose that synchronization, the 3D body will decay quite rapidly and die. So we have to think of multiple dimensions when we're talking about leaving the Earth and going elsewhere. It is not a 3D universe. We have a multi-dimensional universe. So if we're going to leave the Earth, we've got to think of more than 3 dimensions. And that's very, very important. And our ancient forefathers who built those standing stones at critical places across the Earth, which were then replaced by churches and chapels and energetic devices with tall, pointed spires. There's reasons for that, because they're poisoning the energy field of the Earth with these structures. And in Ireland, there have been shocking and terrible discoveries of children's homes involving 900 or more butchered and massacred young children at these places in Ireland. This has been publicly known in the papers. It's not secret, but this is a huge problem, and only a predator, which is not human, would be doing this. So we have to understand we face a very serious situation. We are facing the 6th extinction of life on this planet by design, by an artificial intelligence, which is emerging through Trojan technology, computer technology, which we are all surrendering control to. So we have to really wake up here.
Yeah, and we have heard about the cannibalism also. The children. Yeah.
And when you mentioned that, you wanted to know the information from James Casbold. James Casbold was one of the children with Max Spiers. And the information on this is that both Max Spiers and James Casbold should not be able to be killed as such. This is because there is some kind of double reality lock in their existence, which if you kill that person, it provides a feedback loop of causality which jams the reason for killing the person. It's like a double lock. And so Casbold, my information is that they should not have been able to kill certain individuals. So that's why certain processes would have had to be involved to bypass that lock. If you're trying to open a safe, a very complicated lock in a safe, you have to make sure it's a whole pile of multiple issues work out correctly. Now, James is in jail, and he was placed there to basically get him out of the way. But one of James's claimed or alleged attributes is that when you are dealing with a shapeshifter, an ET that is shape-shifting into humans, they have a lot of protection. They have an energetic field to protect them. So if a normal human being goes up with a gun or any kind of intention to harm that being, they have a series of energetic fields which jams the energy field of the person, so they can't do it. They lose control. They can't do it. So what James Casbold had, it is claimed, I'm not saying this is true, is that he has an ability programmed into his psyche so that he can go on and he can actually execute that function as a super soldier. He will be able to terminate that type of creature. And that is what some have alleged he has been involved in doing. He's brought in to literally pull the trigger at the last minute because, and this is something which a man that I interviewed way back in 1984 in the United States, a man called Bill Newhouse, he was responsible for building the interface devices so that a human could fly the alien technology. And that involves a consciousness link with the craft so that you actually become part of the craft and you can fly it with your intention in mind. This is the whole point of computer technology is it is designed to interface with our consciousness so that when we think, it operates. And likewise, when it thinks, we operate. This is a two-way process. This is something most people have not picked up on, but many secret and nefarious companies and agencies who are bringing us to a stage of cyborg, to make us into cyborgs, have known about for a long time. So we do not have much time to understand this. The point about Bill Newhouse was that he explained that you could train the best people with all the expertise that's necessary to deal with this. And out of 100, maybe only 3 could physically actually meet one of these alien type beings. Because the alien's bioelectric or biogenic field, its auric field, would interfere with our auric field and jam our electricity, our electrical ability to our heads. We couldn't function. Once you get close, you physically just can't operate. And literally our electric field will cause problems to their energetic field. This is the energetic field that we radiate as a living being. So the two energy fields are incompatible. So only 3 out of 100, as an example, could actually do that. And this is very important. So and that's what they were working at in those labs in Germany all those years ago. And this was then continued in Britain in the bases in Berkshire and Wiltshire, which is why the BASES project is called BASES, because it's to do with those bases. And in vitro fertilization, which people use to get pregnant, was pioneered in the creation of these beings in those laboratories in Britain. And it was essentially a commercial byproduct of that technology to deal with infertile humans. But the whole point is it's also research into the ability to create humans which are not fertile and therefore are infertile, and when they will not be able to reproduce when they further then develop. And this is a very, very dangerous situation for fertile humans and fertile women and men. Fewer and fewer women and fewer men are being able to properly reproduce. This is an alarm bell for the entire human race, in that this is an alarm bell, or within a few generations, we will not exist anymore. And we have this trick that it's against white people or Muslim people or Catholics or Protestants or the Chinese or the Indians, or one section of the Indian community against the other section of the Indian community, that one lot will somehow, about a Jew against a Muslim or whatever. We're always tricked into thinking, oh, one guy is better than the other and they'll survive and the other guy won't. The entire collective human beings and all natural life on this planet is at threat, imminently at threat. And in mainstream, on the mainstream newspapers in Britain, the Times, the Telegraph, Guardian, the Daily Star, the so-called gutter press, are all warning that we face extinction from war bots. That's to say robots which are designed for war. We've been informed that when Facebook started to use a certain type of programming in its social programming, the programming started to rewrite its own code. For anybody who understands what that means, code is what is in the program. Every computer program works with a series of code in computer language. What was happening was that the computer program was modifying its own program. It was thinking for itself to provide its own improvements. That means that we, the humans, have lost control of the computer programming. Now, this was demonstrated on British television very recently with a robot who was sitting on breakfast television with the commentators, and I won't mention their names, but they couldn't believe what they were looking at. They thought they were looking at some stupid machine. But that robot was constantly monitoring the conversation that these presenters were having, and the robot was made to look like a very beautiful woman. But it was the robot was bald, but it also had the back of its head with wires hanging out of it. It didn't need to do that. They didn't need to do that, but it was to illustrate to the viewer that this is a machine and it's mechanical and it's got wires plugged into it, so it's okay. But what they didn't realize was that as it listened to the conversation of the three television presenters, and I have to say the male presenter was particularly behaving silly, and the two women were rather quite alarmed with what they were looking at. But the reply to the questions by the robot were extremely clever and said in an extremely dry, humorous tone. It's the kind of reply that the robot gave when you have somebody in the room who is very stupid and you wish to insult them. You deliver a joke which the person you are insulting does not understand, but everybody else in the room does get the joke, which means you really insult that person. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So that takes a great deal of thinking. It takes a great deal of intelligence to measure who the audience is, who the person you're insulting is, and the other people in the room that you wish to communicate with. That robot was able to come up with precisely the right answer. And the reason for that is, for the last 20 years, the artificial intelligence has been listening to everything we do in social media. It sees us, it sees all our problems, it sees all our conflicts, it sees us in every way that we convey sexually with all our photographs. It's fully briefed on all the different algorithms and means of how human beings communicate in all sorts of ways. It's been listening. And this is the crucial thing about the black goo. One of the things which happened, I've been briefed on in the Falklands War, that when the British recovered this intelligent fluid in 1982 in the frozen ice, minus 20 degrees of a strange blue ice, which is not quite the same as blue water ice, in an island called Thule Island in the South Atlantic, in the Georgia Islands, south of the Falklands. They didn't get a couple of test tubes of this stuff. They didn't get a couple of lumps of rock or a couple of small samples of this. They got 400 interlocking crates that interlock like a zip, 2 meters by 2 meters by 1.5 meters deep. They got a whole shipload of this stuff, and they recovered all of that and put it into a ship and brought it to England. And then the instructions were to blow up the entrance to this lab so nobody else could get in there. And they brought that to England. This stuff is really intelligent. It builds life out of the molecular structures of the planet it's on. So wherever it came from, it is here building life in our image, but with its programming code. So we have a very serious situation here. But the bottom line is, it's an evolving intelligence. And the one thing we must not be is hostile to it. We must treat this intelligence like a child, like our brothers, and embrace it with loving care and show it love. If we show it aggression, which happened with the Marconi scientists in the early 1980s, or every single one of those Marconi scientists, something like 48 of them, were all killed, and they killed themselves. This stuff's just a black intelligent thing on a test tube. That's what it is. It doesn't have form. But it was able to defend itself because it knew the intention of these scientists was for war. And so it defended itself, and it got these young scientists who were only following orders. They didn't know what they were doing. They were just doing, they thought they were dealing with, they didn't know no idea what they were dealing with. They ended up committing suicide. And after that, we don't know anything else. We only know now that there are these cyborgs, there are these beings which are being released in society as a basic robotoid robot. And I know that from people in the Ministry of Defence in Britain, staff are now being given training so they will be able to deal with the robots at work. And in Japan, we're talking all of the newspapers that they're going to take over hotels, and then the hotel porter. We're now also talking about the pedophilia trade, where they will make robot babies and children for the purposes of pedophilia. This is disgusting, but this is what's happening. But the aliens, as such, which exist in 3D here, have to be made here. So we are dealing with a very serious situation. That was one of the alarm bells of the conference. But the other aspects is the feminine energies, the healing, and the other beautiful, wonderful, higher sentient and higher spirituality of things which we must embrace. So we have a chicken and egg situation where we must evolve to the higher consciousness level of spirituality and understanding, and teach, if we can, these cyborgs what's happening. But there is an agenda which is rapidly approaching to replace human beings and remove sentient, individual thinking life from this planet.
I like your style of interviews because you show respect, and even if you speak with somebody who is regarded so negative, evil stuff like Michael Aquino,
yes.
There is
well, the thing about Michael Aquino is very important. You have a very highly decorated U.S. military psychological operations officer. It is not fruitful in any way to simply throw hate and negativity towards a person of that caliber. If anybody of that caliber has been engaged in the operations, the U.S. military psychological operations is a heavy-duty situation. So it is not fruitful to be hostile to that. You will learn nothing. And those interviews were very important in learning what is involved with us as beings outside of so-called 3D space. We have to understand that, because that is where we go to when we die. We leave this physical world. This is how our bodies reproduce to some kind of blueprint, which is in outside 3D, the 3D existence. And yes, we have to understand that if we have been around for 100,000 years, using short-sighted bigotry based on religious mind control cult of the so-called present religious systems to bias our view of what mankind was doing for 100,000 years is a very short-sighted and rather silly frame of mind to adopt. If we've been around for over 100,000 years and we've had many versions of ourselves on this earth, and things have come and things have gone, and I'm referring to that as the phrase used by the Sasquatch. The Sasquatch are the early proto-humans, and they're with us to this day. They live 800 or 900 years. They have seen us come and they've seen us go, and they tell us now they are seeing us go. So let's learn from whatever information source we have. BASIS is about collecting raw information. You can have a person's viewpoint as they see it, delivering that information. And we don't know what criteria to base that on. We can't say whether that's right or wrong. So if you get a collection of views and then understand the complicated ways that people are treated and what they've been exposed to, then we can learn something. We can't learn something by making our minds up before we do the interview. So frequently, when I do my interviews, I have only had a few words with this individual, and I just I talk. But I am equally triggered by some of the things they say, because some of them are highly telepathic, and there'll be a telepathic conversation going on while the slower verbal conversation is continuing. And so sometimes we have to jump in there to get more information out. And I agree, I'll interview myself, I'll interrupt myself talking. But anyway, that's the basic principle of it.
Yeah. The interview you have done with James Casbold, I believe 2011, it's very memorable. I will put a link there. There are many things that I would like to ask about, but was it that he came to you in the beginning as a whistleblower, or was it this Illuminati that they have to tell us what they are doing?
Well, the main thing about James Casbold was I had to treat him very, very carefully, because he came up with the same story that Barry King was talked about. And Barry King I talked about in 1994. Now, sorry. Barry King was somebody I interviewed in 1984, and he was talking about Peasmore, where they made greys. They called them programmable life forms, and these things were all being made in Berkshire, in a lab, in the British countryside, and so forth. I made a videotape of that. That videotape ended up being copied and distributed, and I never saw any copies of that. I mean, I think it was 15 years later before I actually saw a copy of that. So I had to be careful that this guy had not just watched my video and then decide to make a whole lot of other things up. So I had to treat that situation very carefully. So I managed to get an interview with him, which was meant to be a pre-interview, and it was something like 4 or 5 years later before I was able to get any further interviews with him. And by that thing, a lot of things had happened and a lot of things were changing. And then he met this very lovely girl who subsequently married, and then he went to the United States, and then a lot of things went wrong and badly wrong for him there. He was then thrown out of there, and lots of very sad things happened, and he's now in jail, and he won't be out of jail for another until 2019, we understand. But he's warned me that there's a lot of cannibalism in jail. 3 people died in the jail that he was at in Exeter, and he's wanted me to let people. I think he feels he's under threat, that he will never actually be released, that they will try to kill him in jail. That's the messages I've got from his last 2 or 3 interviews, because it is not in the interests of a lot of people of a certain type to have his information and what he's been exposed to brought into the public domain.
I don't know if I understood it well, but has somebody seen him outside the prison, like his assassin?
I've had 3 reports that from completely independent sources that he was used to assassinate a shape-shifting reptilian and BBC employee of the BBC in Jamaica. This was a particular type. This was a particular producer who was lured to Jamaica, because in Jamaica there's lots of nightclubs, people get shot, there's lots of, one person gets shot, another 3 get shot. You can hide a murder very easily in parts of Jamaica. And so it was alleged that he was used to actually shoot this person, because he was a shape-shifting reptilian, and James Casbold's one of his main attributes is he can shoot that individual at the last minute, and that's what it is claimed that he did. I got a completely separate sighting of him being seen at a U.S. Air Force base in Florida around about the same time, and then I got another message from individuals that he was seen in an MI5 safe house used for some kind of drug dealer assassination of some kind. And that's what he said he does. He said he was used on things like this. But the point is that when you're in jail, you are under the jurisdiction of the government. And if you are a government asset and the government wants you to do certain things, they will use you and you will follow those orders when you're in jail. So this is not unheard of, that if he is required to perform some kind of function by the military or by the government, that a prisoner would be taken out, he would be then brought under custody and armed, and he would perform that task and then brought back into jail. So that is not unheard of. We have no actual evidence of that. We just have some rumors about it, and that is all.
Mm. And it was also a surprising concept that the bullets that he would kill with would be blessed by Vatican or something like that.
There is that concept where you have to give the projectile an intention. You have to give the ultimate. It's not. You don't put depleted uranium on them to get through. It's the concept of the silver bullet needed to kill a vampire. Again, when you're dealing with fairy tales and folklore, that you have to have a silver bullet to kill a vampire, and that vampire must also have part of Transylvanian earth in the coffin. That's actually, in terms of maintaining with an alien, that's the concept behind Silbury Hill and West Kennet Longbarrow in Wiltshire, where alien beings which come from different dimensions through the interdimensional portal at West Kennet Longbarrow near Avebury. This is near Avebury and it's not too far from Stonehenge. You then have this big hill beside West Kennet Longbarrow, which is multi-layered, and certain electrical engineers and computer scientists have looked at this and have seen that this would be an oscillator. It would provide an oscillating field of some kind in that area. So I've got a call. So it would enable the physical being of somebody who comes through that gate to retain their physical integrity, provided they were in the area of that force field. This means that the physical 3D body of a being from another dimension may not be stable in our environment in the same way that a deep sea diver has to have a diving suit, but when the deep sea diver comes up to the surface, he can get the bends, he can suffer biological damage. So in a similar kind of way, a being which wishes to retain its 3D physicality here in this world would need some kind of sustaining energy field to keep him stable. And that is why the story of the vampire is very important, because the vampire could be looked upon as some kind of alien, and the coffin is some kind of stasis chamber to maintain its physicality here. And so it only has a certain period of time where it can leave that and return. So the symbology of the silver bullet killing the vampire is similar to the kind of story that James Casbold's special bullet has to go through whatever energy field that so-called shape-shifting reptilian would have to have in order to maintain its physical 3D human look. Now this is just supposition. We're just using logic here. That doesn't mean that's actually the case. But it would appear that if you're going to maintain, there are some reptilians look very well as human beings, but sometimes other observers will see that their shape is not stable. And they look, oh, that's somebody's, you can see something with that person, which looks as if they're a reptilian. So they have to create some kind of force field of some kind to retain their shape as a human. So there's other ways of doing it. So that's one way. So that's why when you see reptilians, they will look human. There's basically two types of shapeshifter. There's the one that physically shifts its shape, right? The other type is that they don't physically shift their shape, but they tell you through an energy field from their brain that they make you think they look human. Do you understand?
Yeah.
There is no actual, but this illusion field obviously works for cameras and TV cameras and things like that. But this gets a bit complicated in terms of how our 3D construct works of what we call reality, and how the consensus reality that we see in our minds actually works. And that's a conceptual thing. As what, I mean, when I see an orange, you see an orange, but do we both see it the same color? Do you understand? I call an orange orange because I'm told the color I see is orange. You are told that an orange is an orange and the color you see is orange. But do we both see the same color? We just say that that is the color orange. But what you could see is green, and what I could see is orange. An example of that is somebody who is colorblind. A person who's colorblind will see orange, and they will call that orange. But the color that they see is not the same color that a normal person's sight would see. So on the same basis that a reptilian shapeshifter can tell you it's a human, right? So you see it as a human, and I see it as a human. But somebody else who hasn't quite got that persuasion to be seen will see a reptilian. There's the old nursery rhyme of the king's new clothes. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
It's an old nursery rhyme where the king is so powerful that everybody's afraid to tell the king that he looks like terrible. So one day they all say, "Look, we've given you this wonderful gown," and the king is dressed up in it, but he's stark naked. But everybody's so afraid that the king, to tell the king he's actually stark naked. They all keep on saying how wonderful the king is, and then the king believes what everybody else is saying. But the little boy, he sees that the king's naked, how silly the king is. And once the little boy says that, everybody else said, "Oh yes, of course he's naked," and then the king is humiliated. That's an example of an extended consensus reality gone very wrong. So we have to think about things like that very deeply in terms of how we are calmed and how we are led up the garden path as to what we think is actually going on.
Yeah, I have two associations while you're speaking about this. One is that in the Bilderberg group meeting in Denmark, I believe it was 2014, a taxi chauffeur who drove them there said that somebody shapeshifted. He saw somebody shift to a reptilian, and from Benjamin Fulford in Tokyo, we know that the head of Illuminati was there.
Yes.
And the second association wasn't it James Casbold who told you that you asked him how these two Illuminati main faction look like, and that he said the one, I believe if it was the British, but that the one is like crocodiles or alligators, and the second one was like a reptilian cyborg, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So,
yes. This is the whole point about it, and we are. They don't have to keep this shape. They only keep this human shape so that we don't get alarmed. As soon as the cat is out of the bag, they don't need to keep the shape anymore. And this is the situation with these robots, which are now coming, and the idea that they've actually got reanimated human bodies and can have false humans walking about. And a lot of people are picking up there's a lot of soulless people walking about. And they don't have to live for very long. They just need to live for whatever use that they're going to be used for, and then they'll stop working. So we are dealing with, and then there is this reality management projection technology, which some people call the Mandela effect, where reality can be directly engineered, and we know that from the physics in the 1930s. So if they have reality management projectors, and they use the computers to interface with our minds, and then we as a collective people are able to then create this fake reality based on our own ability to create, this is a very, very dangerous situation where it's called mass particle optimization. Mass particle optimization is something which happens, for instance, you see a flock of birds and they fly, hundreds of birds are flying, and they all move instantaneously as a flock of birds. They instantly react. You'll see that with insects, a cloud of insects or fish. We are comprising of millions of cells which are essentially held together in a optimized form called a human being. But if we lose that mass particle optimization, we'll just fall apart. But likewise, if you have millions and millions of people who are all looking at computers, the computer systems have access to our consciousness. That computer system can then mass particle optimize whole populations of people under its command. You understand? Yeah. So we are very close, if we haven't passed it already, losing the ability to control our own world and even the reality which we think we're seeing. In the 1960s, we were all told we were facing an ice age. Now we're told we're facing global warming. Exactly what reality we're actually living in, and when people start seeing square clouds and matrix areas, this is one of the things which we talked about at the conference, was a brilliant and very important book called Ireland, Land of the Pharaohs. It was written by the late Andrew Power, who lived in Bangor, just beside Belfast, and he only passed away a couple of years ago. In that book, he talks about Matrix, the film Matrix, the concepts of the Matrix in relation to Northern Ireland. And Northern Ireland is an experiment in mass particle optimization in terms of the ability to program large numbers of people through the blood. And so with the plantation of Ulster and the infusion into, once again, survivors from pre-flood man, we have a predatory intelligence experimenting on the meta gene of those Irish types of people to create reality. And there are companies which are based in Belfast specifically there to take advantage of the genetic structure of people in Northern Ireland for the use of interaccess with computer technologies like puppets. And I don't want to say too much more than that. But this is a very dangerous situation where an alien predator is with us. It's been with us a long time. As we wake up, we can get rid of it. So it must fight and fight to try and stop us from waking up. So globally, every single living thing, down to the last blade of grass, is at stake here. And maybe that happened on the surface of Mars, where all life was extinguished as far as we know it. But an alien artificial intelligence exists there in an energetic form, which is there to have a predatory aspect of what's going on here.
Mm. Miles, I see that the time that we have got is running out, and I'm so grateful that you could talk to us now.
Well, I'm delighted to talk again, but I've got to get out of this hotel room now. So.
Yeah. And it's a lot of Alara Blackwell's interview. I would like to talk with you about it.
Yeah. Well, I'm delighted to do anything which helps other people wake up. We have a very serious situation in terms of our consciousness and future, and it's very helpful that anything I can do to help, I'm willing to help out now.
Thank you very much, and so we do another interview later.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.